It's 2021, and you know what happens next here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That's right. It's election time. This November 2nd, the Commonwealth of Virginia will elect its next statewide officials from the governor, lieutenant governor, NAG, and all House of Delegates here in the Commonwealth. But what are their platforms? Who will you vote for? And how will the future of Virginia look after the election? It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. Stay tuned as we discuss Election Overview, Part 1. Welcome back to Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We want to thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. We hope that your back to school has gone as well as you've planned. We know that Labor Day is going, so it's back to work for everyone because we're turning the corner of this pandemic. Also, here on the campus of Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nation, we just had a phenomenal week of events. That's right. We celebrated our Founders Day week along with other events to highlight that time period. But also, we inaugurated our seventh president, Dr. Javon Adams Gaston, here at Norfolk State University. The inaugural ceremonies, the inaugural events, and the investiture ceremony were absolutely outstanding. Norfolk State definitely has a jewel in Dr. J, who we refer to affectionately as Dr. J. And we love her. The students love her, faculty, the stakeholders, alumni, board of visitors, the community. So we're going to reach higher heights and deeper depths in our goal to become the towering force here in the Commonwealth, the United States, and the world. That is the Norfolk State University. So congratulations to the Spartan Nation for our new president, our seventh president that we have at this phenomenal historical university. Celebrating 86 years as well. 86 years that this university has stood tall and continues to stand tall. So one great thing about the Commonwealth is that we have an election every year. And if you're a politics junkie like me, you can't wait until the calendar turns because, there's another slate of elections coming up. And you'll hear all the time here in the Commonwealth where we say there's an important election this year. And that's because there's an important election every single year. Now, I've got my producer here, Marvin Folks, and we talk about politics a lot. And here, I always say that all politics is local. And maybe you've heard it from elsewhere. I heard it from Kofi Annan, the late former UN Secretary General. And it's so very true. What matters the most is what takes place on our local level. What matters most is what takes place in our community. But don't mistake that things that take place on the state level and the federal level doesn't affect you. It does. It affects you very, very much so. So we're going to take a look at this is our Part 1 series. Part 2 is next Sunday, where we're going to take a look at the local races. But Part 1, we're going to take a look at the statewide races here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And keep in mind, Virginia is known. Our election is the year after the U.S. presidential election. And it's the year before the midterm elections. So what happens is that Virginia is really the test of what can work in midterms, and also is a gauge of how far we've come after the presidential election for both sides. And look, let me tell you, win or lose, things can turn just like that. And now listen, I think more of us in our country have been engaged in politics than ever before in the last, I would say, 12 years, right? With the election of Barack Obama, re-election of Barack Obama, and of course the election of President Donald Trump, right? And now, so many people are engaged in politics. They're engaged in not just voting, but why they should vote, why they should go out and vote. The other thing that they're engaged in is they're engaged in public policy. So now we hear this discussion about, well, if I give you my vote, if I cast my vote for you, what type of policies are you now going to enact to benefit me on the local level, or me personally? I know one thing that we have, we're on a college campus, and one major question that's being asked is, when will student loan forgiveness or debt be forgiven? You know, that was one of the major, Marvin's back here laughing because everyone knows he's a graduate student in cybersecurity and a phenomenal cybersecurity program here. And, you know, there's a lot of students that have to take on a lot of debt to get this great education that our country offers through all of the great universities. But we do know that sometimes the debt that was taken on is probably taken on unjustly, and is probably and we also know that that type of debt can stop the economy from moving like it should. So President Biden said he'll forgive $10,000 plus interest, which is very significant for all students who borrow student loans across the board. But there is a push to do more for HBCU students or students that receive Pell Grants or whatever the case may be because of the additional burden. So that's the type of policy that people are looking at and talking about when it comes to if I give you my vote, if I cast my vote for you. But we're going to take a look at what the platforms are for our statewide offices. In the first half of the show, we're going to talk about voting. We're going to talk about and look at where you're going to go vote, when the election time is, and the like. And we're going to take a look at some candidates. And in the second half of the show, we're going to take a look at some statewide candidates in the House of Delegates. In the second half of the show, we're going to break down the statewide candidates for office, for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. So if you've been paying attention just a little bit, you know that the fight for the right to vote has been one that we've had to fight as African Americans and also as women for centuries. Very recently, the Voting Rights Act has been under attack like no other. And this can go back to Shelby County versus Holder under President Obama, where it removed a formula for preclearance, which nullified that particular part of the Voting Rights Act. And then also we see in other states where states have enacted other policies to stop the ability for you to go out and vote, or making it harder, putting more barriers there, such as happened in North Carolina, where the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals basically said that this particular provision by North Carolina, which limited places where you could go vote, shortened times and the like in a county, where impacted African Americans, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals said that this was by surgical precision, disadvantaged African Americans or the black vote. So that was very recently. We're talking 2015, 2017. Then we see now where the state of Georgia, state of Texas, and again, North Carolina enacting laws and policies on the state level to impede your ability to go out and vote. Now, when I say impede your ability to go out and vote, you can still vote. But in Georgia, if you give somebody a bottle of water, you can go to jail. That's right. Think about that. You know, these are the type of provisions that we see. Also, not being able to register to vote on the day of, or not being able to cast mail-in ballots and the like, that we saw what happened during the federal election. It worked. It worked. And we had no doubt it would work because we had a lot of safeguards there. But the false narrative was, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. But it did. Now, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, just last week, the governor signed a ceremonial signing here in the city of Newport News on the peninsula here in Hampton Roads of Virginia's Voting Rights Act, which basically provides more protections under the federal law for you to exercise your right to vote. A massive, a huge, a tremendous effort by delegates and legislative senators and legislators and the community pushing for this to happen. And it did. That's when smart policy meets good legislators to do the best and the most good for its citizenry. This is what happens. And that's why being engaged is so important. So, here in the Commonwealth, on November 2nd, this is the general election. In other words, you will go to the ballot box to vote for your governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and your delegate, and any local offices that are running in your community. Now, again, part 2, we're going to look at local offices on next week's show. So we'll look at the city council, we'll look at the school board, and other offices that are running in those various municipalities here in Hampton Roads. But we're going to elect our next governor. I believe it's the 74th governor. I'm not looking, I didn't look it up. I think it's the 74th. I've looked at it so many times. I know Governor Ralph Northam, who's a good friend. He's been also a great governor as well. He is our 73rd governor, done a phenomenal job. So he's going to leave this office because here in the Commonwealth, you can't run for consecutive offices. Now, one of the candidates running for governor is Terry Mccullough, who was the 72nd governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So if he wins, he'll be the 72nd and the 74th. Now, he can do that because he's not running for consecutive terms, but he's running for a term after he finished his term before. But on November 2nd, you'll be able to go to the ballot box and vote for governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, House of Delegates, and some local offices. Now, the first day of in-person early voting, at your local voter registrar's office was the 17th of September, the 17th. And that was last week, Friday. You can go and vote for your choice of candidate. In addition to that, the deadline to register to vote or update existing voter registration is October 12th. October 12th is the deadline to register to vote or update an existing registration. Also, the deadline to apply for a ballot to be mailed to you to vote by mail is Friday, October 22nd. You must request, it must be received by your local voter registration office by 5 p.m. So if you want to vote by mail, you got to request it by October 22nd. If you want to register to vote or update your existing voting registration, you got to do that by October 12th. But you can start voting now. The first day to start voting was on the 17th of September. So you can go to your local voter registrars, the clerk of court, wherever that's located in your city, and vote. Voter registration offices are open on Saturday, October 23rd through October 30th for early voting. Early voting. And then also, the last day for in-person early voting at your local registrar's office, local voter registration office, is Saturday, October 30th at 5 p.m. All this information can be found at the Virginia Department of Elections website. That's the Virginia Department of Elections website. You can find if it's your first time voting, you can find where to go vote. You can register to go vote. Just click on the link. And guys, make it an event. Take your friends. Hey guys, let's go. We're going to go vote together on a Friday or on a Monday or a Wednesday or whatever the case may be. But make it an event because this is your voice. Make your voice heard. Now, with that, as I stated, we're going to look at who are we voting for? Now, this year, we're voting for all the candidates for the House of Delegates. Now, a lot of these offices are running unopposed. For example, we're going to look at the 1st District all the way to the 100 District. And we're going to look at who's really opposing who in this particular district. Now, here in Hampton Roads and also here in the Commonwealth, we have several districts that are up, and some of our alums who are serving in the House of Delegates, Delegate Cliff Hayes, who's an alum of Norfolk State University, Delegate Candy King, who's an alum of Norfolk State University, Delegate Lamont Bagby, who's who's the chair of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, who's up for re-election. Those are all in the House. They're alums who are here. And keep in mind, we have 5 alums that serve in the House and the Senate. That is phenomenal. But not just serve, but they hold high-ranking positions in their respective houses. Senator Louise Lucas, the first African-American woman president pro tem of the Senate. We have Senator Spruill, who's been serving long and also helps to chair various committees. Delegate Cliff Hayes, Lamont Babby, Candy King, all these individuals are serving on key committees to help our community, to help their districts, to help our institution. Right now, this is our time. This is our moment. This is our mission and our vision. So let's not miss it. So let's look at these districts. District 1 is a Republican district. There is no one contesting it. District 2, this is where Candy King is. Delegate Candy King, alum of Norfolk State University. She is running. She is the incumbent. This is the district that was given up by Jennifer Carroll Ford, who ran for governor. Who ran for the nomination of governor last year. She was all in. She came in second behind Tara McCullough. So Candy King won this election in a special election. Her challenger is Republican Gina Searcia, who's running against her. So she has a challenge. 3rd district, 4th, 5th, 6th. These districts are not being contested. The 7th district is being contested. The 8th district is being contested. The 9th is being contested. The 10th is being contested. Now, in the 7th, no one running is an incumbent. So this is going to be a new representative. In the 8th, the incumbent is a Republican candidate. In the 9th, there is no incumbent. So this is going to be a new representative. In the 10th, the incumbent is a Democrat. In the 11th, we see where Sam Rasool is being challenged. Sam Rasool, also ran for lieutenant governor for the nomination for the Democratic Party and ran a very tight race with Hala Ayala, who is the lieutenant governor candidate. And we'll talk about her in the second half hour. And keep in mind that all these candidates for statewide office were on State of the Water last year during our time for our election series, earlier this year, during our time for our election series. So, as I said, we bring policymakers, movers, and shakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. So we're going to have them back on as we start our election series up again. But let me move on. So in the 12th district, there's someone is being contested. 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, and we see other districts. Most of those are being contested, but the rest of these districts are not being contested. We have to get to the 31st district that's being contested after that. Elizabeth Guzman, who's running in the 31st district, as you know, one of my childhood homeboys, was actually running for that nomination in order to run against her. Run for that particular seat. He lost, but he was also on State of the Water. That's Roger Hall. And then we see other districts that are basically not being contested. Now, let's take a look at some of our candidates for the House who are here in Hampton Roads. Well, first of all, our alum, Lamont Bagby, in the 74th district. He is the incumbent, and he's being contested as well. We also see where Delegate Cliff Hayes, who is being contested. He is the alum of Norfolk State in the 77th district. And then we also see here a few more districts here where we see here in the 94th, which is on the peninsula, they're being contested, and the 93rd. Both of those are being contested. And also in the 95th, it's also being contested. And that's Delegate Marcia Price, who actually was the sponsor of the Voting Rights Act that was recently signed ceremonially here in Newport News. And we see Delegate Jay Jones, who also represents this district, he is being challenged as well. So one thing about the House and one thing about these elections, you'll see the majority of these House districts will not be challenged. The majority of the House districts will not be challenged. Now, is that a problem? Some people don't think so, especially the incumbents. But does democracy really work when we have individuals who are in office and not being challenged? You're listening to Hot 91, WNSB, the soul of VA. I'm Dr. Eric Claville, and this is State of the Water. You're joining us here as we go through our part one of our election overview. Right now, we're taking a look at statewide offices in this particular show, where we look at the offices that are up for re-election and up for election here in the Commonwealth. One great thing about the Commonwealth is that there's an important election every year, because there is an election every single year. So in the first half hour, we're taking a look at the House districts, and we also discuss where you can actually go vote, where you can go register, and the importance of learning where those places are and the dates are. And we're also looking at some statewide houses that are being challenged here, more specifically our alums and members of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. In the second half hour, we're going to delve into the governor, lieutenant governor, and AG, and delve into their campaigns and really talk about them and the sides that they're on, what this will look like for us. So as we go back to discuss the House of Delegates, and we said that majority of these houses are not being challenged, or if they're being challenged, then there's not really a major challenge, a major push, because these districts are fairly safe. Now, is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is this good for democracy? Is this good for the community that these individuals represent? Is it good for the way that public policy is created here in the Commonwealth Forest? So let's look at one aspect of that question. So let's say, Marvin, we have a delegate, a representative who we know fights for us, fights for his community, fights for policies that will help to lift up the community, lift up families, help to build strong families, help to build strong schools that educate, help to bring a lot of commerce into the district, such as grocery stores where we can get fresh fruits and vegetables, eateries, and the like. Now, obviously, that's the type of person you want to keep in the community. That's the one you keep in the office. But then we have others who are not doing those things, but they're safe. They've built alliances throughout the community to the people that actually go out and vote. And that's the difference. The politics itself. Now, we had this discussion in the office earlier, whether policies get people's attention or numbers get people's attention. And the key is, if you're a candidate, you're going to gravitate toward the numbers, and you're going to gravitate toward policies or promises. They don't keep. Who was that? Christopher Williams? I think it was. Maybe I'll be sure. Was it Chris? So what ends up happening, you're going to gravitate toward promises to that demographic because you know that they're going to come out and vote. And then the policies will come that will benefit that demographic to which the promises were made that got the candidate in office. So it's numbers first, policy second. In other words, politics runs like a business. You go where the money is. You go where the people are. Because if you go where the people are, there's a greater return on your investment. So if you're not registered to vote, if you don't vote, if you only vote every 4 years for the presidential election, then should you expect a candidate to be voted out of office if they're not doing what they're supposed to do? So again, these are some of the questions that we have to ask ourselves of why things are the way they are. And when we do that, then we can have a better understanding of what we need to do to change. That's the key. That is the key. In order for us to change our communities, you do it through public policy. You do it through voting for candidates that will enact those policies that make our community, your community, a better place. So what would happen? What would happen with these particular races? Well, the projections is that a lot of these houses are very safe, and it's projected, and these districts are safe, which means that the candidates who are in those districts or their party that's represented will either be reelected or another member of that party will be elected. So if that's the case, then we see that the House will remain firm within Democratic control. Now, there's a key to this. That's if the redistricting lines that are drawn will, in fact, ensure that these districts will represent very similar, if not the same, of what it represents now. We're going to look at redistricting very soon, but redistricting itself is a major issue. When I say major issue, it's a major issue here in the Commonwealth. Why is that? Because, well, first of all, let's talk about what redistricting is. Every 10 years, we do something called the U.S. Census. We count the people in our communities, in our country. Those numbers are then counted and then given to each state. Each state then understands how many U.S. representatives they have in Congress based on the apportionment of population. So states that lose population, they lose representation in Congress. Not the Senate, but in the House of Congress, in the House of Representatives, because every state gets 2 senators. Now, this is also very important because these numbers are then provided to the state in order to draw not just congressional lines, but also state representative lines. So now Virginia voted in 2020 with the presidential election to codify in our Constitution, a constitutional amendment, in order to create a redistricting commission where the people will have a say. And the only remedy is the court will then, if it's not accepted, the court will then make a decision. That's right, give their opinion. And so basically you're taking it away from the legislators and giving it to the people. Well, in theory, that sounds great. But we're finding that basically individuals from the legislature were able to put individuals on, well, let me not say they were able to put on there, but individuals that were selected to the commission at first didn't really represent the community at large. But now we see it looks more fair, and we're right now, this is the beginning of it. So this is our system. So it's going to have some tweaks. We got to work it out, okay? But all eyes are on this particular system to determine whether the districts say the same. So if all works well, according to how it was conceived, then we should have a seamless system and the House should look like it looks now. But we shall see. So what we want you to do, again, we want you to stay tuned because in the second half hour, we're going to delve deeper into the other statewide offices of governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. Who's going to be our next governor here in the Commonwealth? Whose vision that's going to be enacted that's going to take Virginia into the next 4 years? This is State of Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We'll be back after these commercial breaks. Welcome back to State of the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We want to thank you so much again for joining us here on this beautiful Sunday. That's right. We just finished a phenomenal week here on the campus of Norfolk State University, where we just celebrated our Founders Day. Our speaker was April Ryan, who is a White House correspondent in Washington Bureau there for the GRIO. And also, one of the most important events that we've had in our history here at Norfolk State University, we inaugurated our 7th president of the Spartan Nation, Dr. Javon Adams Gaston. And I'm telling you, the ceremonies, the events that took place in the daytime, at night, the investiture ceremony, it was something to behold. And I guess that's the Marvin, I guess that's the best description of it, because our motto here on the campus of Norfolk State University and Spartan Nation across the world is behold the green and gold. And let me tell you, we are continuing to behold, because we have a wonderful jewel in our president. So we're looking for great things. The community loves her, the stakeholders, the board of visitors, the faculty, the staff, and also the students. She is a phenomenal jewel here for us here on this campus. So right now, this is part one of our election overview. And part one of election overview, we're taking a look at election 2021. On November 2nd, voters here in the Commonwealth will go to the polls and elect their next governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, along with the House of Delegates in their districts and other local offices. Now, next week, we're having part two, election overview. We're going to break down some local elections here in Hampton Roads. I'm telling you, we have some great elections, some great candidates who are up, and some very important offices that we're going to elect and put individuals in place to represent our community. And with that, we understand that in order to do our due diligence to get the best person in office, we have to do our research. We got to ask the tough questions, and we have to ask ourselves, what do we want to see for our community for the next 4 years? So here on State of Water, we're here to help do that, to help assist with that. You know, we don't tell you what to think, but we give you the information so that you can make a better and more informed decision for yourself. November 2nd, I'll go over this where you can go vote at the end of the show. We went over it at the top of the show. I'll do that for each of these shows because it's very important. But November 2nd, 2021 is the date of our general election. And in that date of our general election, who are we voting for? Well, let's take a look at the office of governor. In the office of governor, we have two candidates. Former Governor Terry Mccullough, who's a Democratic candidate, and also Glenn Youngkin, who is a businessman and the Republican candidate. Let's take a look at Terry's candidacy. Now, if you go to his website, that's terrymccullough.com, you'll see where Terry Mccullough says he's running to create good jobs, make healthcare more affordable, invest in education, deliver the leadership that the people of the Commonwealth need, and he needs your help. So, of course, everybody wants that. Those sound really good. But if you go to his website, he talks about not just delivering those things, but he outlines his plan for it. And his plan for it, he gives a vision in various areas of our society, and he gives a white paper, but he also gives in-depth information about that. So under Terry's vision, and I'm going to his website, taking a look at this, Virginia's future, for quality education for every child, jobs in the Virginia economy, rebuilding Virginia after COVID-19, healthcare, prescription drugs, ending gun violence epidemic. And, you know, we're going to talk about the gun violence epidemic after our election series, because that's something that we've got to really focus on, not just as a community, but as a country. It looks like we've done a 180, you know, from COVID to now. But we're going to get into that later. Also, clean energy, the rural community, agriculture and forestry, higher education, STEM-H, which is computer science and computer science education, entrepreneurial ecosystem, affordable housing, food insecurity, justice and inequality, inclusion, women's rights and equality, lifting up every Black Virginian, and supporting Virginia's senior citizens. So if you go to his site, if you click on one of those boxes, it gives an overview of what he wants to do. And then you can go more in depth. He goes more in depth with a step-by-step plan of how he wants to get that done. Now, the challenger, Glenn Youngkin, you know, he believes he wants to lead Virginia because he believes that Virginia needs a new leader. And I'm looking at his campaign. You can take a look at it at youngkinforgovernor.com. That's runforgovernor.com. He's running because he says he's not a politician. He's a homegrown Virginian where he spent 30 years here in the area raising his family, serving in church, building business, creating jobs. Guided by faith, values, and unshakable belief in Virginia that it can be the very best. Now, his background is that he is a co-founder of the Carlyle Group, which is a very successful company that employs a lot of people and do a lot of diverse things. So he's proven in the area of business. Of course, Chair Mccullough is our former governor. He's proven as a former governor. And if we take a look at Youngkin's campaign, now, he's not going to have a lot of in-depth information such as Terry's campaign, Terry's vision. But if you click on Glenn Day One campaign, what will he do on day one? He says he's going to cut costs for Virginians, keep communities safe, reinvigorate job growth, restore excellence in education, and make government work for you. Let me talk about some of the things that he wants to do to cut costs for Virginians. Eliminate grocery tax, suspend the recent gas tax hike for 12 months, and provide a one-time rebate of $600 for joint filers and $300 for individuals. For keeping communities safe, he's going to fully fund law enforcement and not defund them. He's going to fire the parole board and keep violent criminals off the street. Now, I want you to hear that again. He's going to fire the parole board and keep violent criminals off the street. Now, parole is for individuals who have paid their debt to society and been upstanding citizens in prison or in the system, and they're able to come out and become productive. So he's going to eliminate that. Also, fix the broken mental health system, and he also wants to launch a unity in community programs for Operation Ceasefire and Project Exile, again, for gun violence. So again, he talks about gun violence. Again, this is something we're going to cover later on in the State of the Water, but this is very important. As relates to job growth, he wants to add 400,000 jobs and 10,000 startups. As far as restoring excellence in education, he wants to keep schools safe, restore high expectations, and rebuild schools and create more charter schools. And make government work for you by fixing the DMV. I tell you what, I like to see that. And if you could do it, it'll be duplicated in every state. But I believe our DMV runs pretty well. I've gotten vehicles registered and so forth, and it was fairly seamless. Others may say it a little differently. But also he says he wants to protect our constitutional rights. Now, what does that mean? Because there are some rights that some parties don't want to protect and they limit, and there are some rights that another party wants to protect and limit. But also, invest more money in roads and highways and the like. If you take a look at both of these platforms, one thing that McCullough's campaign does, he gives more in-depth information about not what he'll do on day one, but what he'll do throughout his administration. There's a vision, a one-pager, but then more in-depth information. On Youngkin's campaign, he'll tell you what he'll do day one, not a lot of specifics, but what he'll do day one, moving into the office, and how it will progress throughout the administration. So, as we take a look at the office of governor, the office of governor here in the Commonwealth, we've been a solid, reliable blue state. And when I say blue, that's a Democratic state. Pretty much since Terry Mccullough, after Governor McDonald, and then, of course, Governor Ralph Northam, and then now. So we've been a fairly reliable Democratic state. And the projections are we'll continue to be there. But the polls do show that it's a very close race. When I say close, Terry Mccullough is not leading by 10 points. He's leading by less than 10 points when you put in the margin of error. Now, what's the significance of this? The significance of this is that whoever goes out and vote, whoever gets their base out to go vote, that's who's going to win. And that's very key, because if you're able, this is why the Voting Rights Act here in the Commonwealth and what we talked about federally is very important. If you're limiting individuals' ability to go out and vote, if you're putting up barriers or impeding their ability to go vote. Now you're creating an advantage by policy. This is why public policy is so important. On a show I did, we looked at the voting rights this past year. And we did a tale of two states. We looked at the Commonwealth of Virginia and Georgia. And this was after the election. And we saw what Georgia was doing, and we saw what Virginia was doing. Two former states of the Confederacy, two strong Confederate states. And we see the former capital of the Confederacy leading the charge in becoming one of the most progressive states as it relates to voting and creating opportunities for people to vote more and not less. And what Georgia's doing, the exact opposite. Now, here, when you get your base to go vote, is more likely that you're going to have a higher turnout and you'll win. If you don't focus on your base, it's less likely that you're going to get a lot of independent voters or first-time voters. Because in this election year, 2021, you're not going to get a lot of those individuals who are actually going to come out and vote if they're not voting for you. How would this be affected by COVID? So we looked at the various policies in voting. We know that Virginia just signed the Voting Rights Act. Here, giving more protections to the great things that we've done for voting. But we're still in COVID, okay? We haven't come out of COVID. We're still in COVID. What is the significance of that as it relates to campaigning? Well, more people are out. I'm seeing more people come to my door, ring my doorbell, canvass in my community. I see the text campaign is still happening. I still get text messages from campaigns or groups that are campaigning for various issues. I still get mailers. My mail is full of various newspapers and also campaign things. And then also phone calls, right? But does that guarantee that you're going to come out to vote? Does that guarantee that they're going to get their message over to you? Maybe, maybe not. But that door-to-door is really one of the major pushes that we see, Marvin, as it relates to getting people out to vote. So, also, when we talk about getting out to vote, not just getting you to the polls, not just getting you out going canvassing to tell you about the candidate, but it's also getting you to the polls in COVID. How will long lines be affected in COVID? How will any provisions that are placed in various communities affect going out to vote? Can you stand in line with a mask on? We had to stand in line with a mask on outside. What are some of the challenges that various individuals will have in order to go in and vote during the pandemic? I don't think that those are major issues here in the Commonwealth, and definitely in Georgia there's be an issue. But here in the Commonwealth, I don't think that's going to be an issue because of protections that we have in place for this specific thing. So I think we're good. I think that the turnout, individuals will be able to go vote if they want to. I believe the turnout of the base, depending on the candidates and the parties getting their base out, will be tremendous, and it will not be impeded by COVID or COVID protocols to keep people safe. So I think that we're looking at an election where if you are energizing your base, they're going to go out and vote. You're listening to State of the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, here on Hot 91, the soul of VA. Here we're talking about our election series. This is part one, where we're looking at statewide offices. Part two, we're going to look at local elections here in Hampton Roads. As we said, here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, there's an important election every year. And an important election is because all politics is local, right? That's right, Marvin. All politics are local. So with all politics being local, what affects you on the local level really affects you faster, and it really has a greater impact on you because it's every day. But make no mistake, candidates who are elected on the statewide level and federal level, that also plays a major part in your everyday life. So we've just dissected and given an overview in some areas of the candidates for governor. There's Terry McCullough, the Democratic candidate, and Glenn Youngkin, the Republican candidate. You can go to their campaigns, terrymccullough.com and youngkinforgovernor.com, and learn more. So now let's take a look at the candidates for lieutenant governor, okay, and attorney general. Now, win or lose, this lieutenant governor election is going to be historic. The Commonwealth of Virginia will elect the first female, the first African-American, the first woman of color here in the Commonwealth as lieutenant governor. Both candidates are both women. Both candidates are black women, women of color. Oh, how many years since the Commonwealth, since we had lieutenant governor? This will be the very first time. So this is going to be historic. So win or lose, the Commonwealth of Virginia, we're going to make history. Okay? Now, what type of history are we going to make? Let's take a look at the candidates. Now, the candidates by gender, by ethnicity, by race, they are similar, if not the same. And history will be made because of that. But their policies, their policy stances couldn't be further apart. So let's first take a look at the Democratic candidate, Hala Ayala. Hala Ayala, again, was a guest here on State of the Water for our election series when we took a look at the primary for Democratic candidates for lieutenant governor. One issue that she really brought out during her time is that she talked about her journey to where she is. Her journey where she is that she had to work to support her children. She even worked at a gas station. She was a gas station attendant. She was a cashier working. And she worked her way. She went to school. And currently, she actually has had a phenomenal career as a cybersecurity specialist with the Department of Homeland Security for over 20 years. That's right. And she completed her degree, her college degree online while working full time, serving in the PTA. Again, her background is tremendous. Now, her background is that as a daughter of a Salvadorian and North African immigrant father and Irish Lebanese mother, she understands about diversity. So she brings that experience in her campaign as well. On the issues, her issues as it relates to healthcare, education, climate change, jobs and the economy, criminal justice reform, transportation and infrastructure, and women's rights are the areas in which she stands on. Now, one of the very important things that I see about her campaign, usually the candidate for governor and the candidate for lieutenant governor, both parties, tend to have almost the exact same platform. Well, here, under this particular candidate for lieutenant governor, there are some areas in which her and Terry McCullough have very similar platforms. When you talk about jobs and the economy, talk about health care, when you talk about transportation, education. But then she looks at issues that are near and dear to her experience when she talks about women's rights, criminal justice reform, climate change. Now, with this, she has her plan there. You can click on it and you can read more about it. And one thing about her plan is that she doesn't give the in-depth as the gubernatorial candidate does, but she does give what she believes she would want to do and what policy she believes that the Commonwealth should be governed by. If she is, that she will champion as well if she's elected. So go to her website and take a look at Hala for Virginia. That's halaforvirginia.com. Now, the Republican candidate, who's actually a former delegate, is Winston Sears here in the Hampton Roads area. And one thing about Winston Sears is that she is, and also the Republican candidate, for Attorney General is also here in Hampton Roads. So we have some candidates in Hampton Roads that are running for these statewide offices that have a chance to represent the Commonwealth in these offices. Now, she's also has an immigrant background as well, being West Indian. She's also a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps. And in there, she's used her time in the Marines to understand and how our country is values and basically shape her as her views of the country. So she was elected to a majority black legislature district as a Republican. And again, this is back in Virginia Beach, here in the Hampton Roads area. The issues that she has that she's concerned about, again, creating good paying jobs. Now, we see that theme across the board. Jobs are good, okay? Not just jobs, but good paying jobs. Cutting costs for family, opening and strengthening schools, uplifting black Virginians, keeping Virginia safe, and serving veterans. So one thing about, again, Winston Sears is that some of her campaign platforms are similar to that of the Republican gubernatorial candidate, Glenn Youngkin, such as creating jobs, good paying jobs, cutting costs for family, eliminating grocery tax and the like, opening and strengthening schools, and keeping Virginia safe. As a matter of fact, if you look at their website, it's really it's the same platform. It's not similar, but it's the same. But where she holds a couple of platforms near and dear to her experience is serving our veterans. As someone who served in the Marine Corps, she understands what veterans have to go through. So she brings that experience with her. Also, uplifting black Virginians. Now, that's not in Glenn Youngkin's campaign platform, but it's in hers because she understands it. It's near and dear to her and her experience. Now, one of the stories that probably have circulated and come out with Winston Sears that she's a major supporter of gun rights. So you've probably seen her holding an automatic weapon and the like. Well, being former military, that's nothing unusual. We have a strong gun tradition here in the country, Second Amendment, but we also know the disparities that exist with gun ownership of African Americans and gun ownership of white Americans. So we do have those standards, but we all have the right to carry and own weapons. The question becomes, what type of weapons? Do you really need an automatic weapon here in the United States? Do you need that in your home? That's a debate for another day. That's another show. But these are the two candidates for lieutenant governor. Once again, win or lose, this race will make history. But the policies in which both stand for, you have to ask yourself, which of these candidates do I want to vote for? Is your choice. It's up to you. And then finally, the candidates for Attorney General. Now, in my opinion, I believe that the Attorney General office is probably the most important statewide office in the Commonwealth. The office of governor gets all the fanfare. You get all the news conferences, press briefs. You get all the ceremony signings. But the Attorney General is the head lawyer of the state. He or she is the one that basically is able to interpret laws through the Attorney General's opinion. They're the ones that's able to litigate on behalf of the Commonwealth. And from a business standpoint, law firms are able to contract with the state to handle various issues that the Attorney General's office don't have the staff for. So we have an opportunity in the Commonwealth to elect not a one-time, not a two-time, but if Mark Herring becomes the next Attorney General, it would be a 3 consecutive term AG. The other great thing about being Attorney General, for anyone who wants to be, is that you can be Attorney General for consecutive terms, not like governor. So his platform itself is a lot of information about what he's already done because he's had a lot of time to do it. So you can take a look at his platform promoting economic opportunity, defending women's rights, fighting for justice and equality for all Virginians, protecting the environment, reducing gun violence, keeping kids safe, combating heroin and the opioid epidemic, which he did a lot of work on because it was a major deal for all of our communities, and building safer and stronger schools. And then we have the Republican candidate, Jason Myers, for Attorney General here. Again, from the area, from Hampton Roads. And Jason himself is of course, he's a lawyer. He is a former criminal prosecutor, and he touts taking on violent criminals and ensuring that those criminals were prosecuted to the fullness of the law. He also talks about his platform, not just prosecuting criminals, but punishing criminals and protecting victims. So his platform is to recreate a pro-business Virginia, stand with the police, restore law and order, common sense election reform, fight human trafficking, opposing illegal immigration, fight for the next generation, and look out for the vulnerable. So we see a lot of his platform really aligns with a lot of the national platform as it relates to a lot of the Republican or conservative stump speeches as in policies that are moving on the federal level. So he will be a first-time Attorney General if he's elected. But the key to this election on November 2nd is the key to every election. You got to get out and vote. If you don't get out and vote, then in essence, you've given up your constitutional right to have a say-so in what your country, state, and community should look like and do. So how do you get out and vote? First of all, you got to register. You can register up till October 12th. October 12th, you can register to vote or update your registration. You also can vote early in person, which started Friday of last week. From September 17th, you can vote early in person all the way up to October 30th. You can go to your local registrar office and go vote there. And the general election, if you don't want to early vote and you're already registered to vote, you can vote on November 2nd, 2021. That's a Tuesday where you can go and cast your vote. You can find all this information here on the Virginia Department of Elections website. Again, voting is the most powerful nonviolent weapon that we have. And that's according to the late, great John Lewis. Exercise your right to vote so that you can have a say-so in what the future of Virginia would be. We look forward to next week as we look at Election Overview Part 2, local level. We'll see you then. God bless.